All right, I think we can start. So good morning again and welcome to our new webinar. Our Build Your Up and Ready Knowledge webinar for Autodesk software. So let me introduce myself. I'm Davide Murtillaro, Technical Support Specialist for the Installation and Licensing Support team. And today we're going to dive into network licensing for versions 2020. It was requested during our last webinar. We have talked about single user troubleshooting and setup for version 2020. There are a few things that changed since previous versions. We're gonna get a look more into detail this time. So for those of you who are new to this format, usually the webinar is divided in two parts. First is a light presentation that we present with all the details regarding the subject we're going to cover. And the second part is a Q&A session, so you can ask any question. And I'll be happy to answer those. So this is a format that has been going on for quite some time, and you may find the past recordings as well as past presentation at the link in this slide. This presentation we're gonna be shared with you once the webinar is finished. So after around 1 hour, you will receive a follow-up email with the link where to download the webinar, and also you'll see I also left a YouTube link to our channel where you can find also the recording of the session. So even if you need to drop out session during the live webinar, you can resume later from our recording on YouTube. Also worth mentioning is that on our YouTube channel is full of other support content for installation and licensing topics. It's a more polished content, so it's really for configuration and high-level setup. But it's also worth to have a look in case some of you or your customer need to move their first steps in installation for Autodesk. So let's go into more detail for version 2020. We've mentioned in the past webinars that with version 2020, a new licensing component has been introduced. That means that the way the software manages the license, whether it is single user, so-called standalone, or multi-user, so-called network license, it's managed differently compared to previous versions. So we've seen what does it mean and how this changes in regard to troubleshooting any issue that come up when you are trying to set it up or you're trying to work with the software. So all 2020 versions come up with this new component. So AutoCAD, Revit, Inventor, all of them come out with this. And this component let us debug more into detail for any issues that could come up, and we can also play around with the installer tool that lets us register and deregister any software and also see if that is set up as a single user software or a multi-user. And we're going to see this in a demo later on. So there are a few things to keep in mind when we talk about the new licensing component. So it usually works with a local service that is running in the background, the so-called ADSK licensing service. The information that is stored for each software that we install on our computer is under Program Data Autodesk ADSK licensing service. As you remember, this storage data was under Autodesk CLM, and now this change is called ADSK licensing service. And the component itself is is installed in this directory under program files 86, common files, Autodesk shared ADSK licensing. And another thing to keep in mind is the install helper. This is a small, very handy tool to see if whether the service is running, whether the license information is registered properly on our computer. We can reset the license with that. We can list all the registered product on our machine. And the good thing about it that is cross-platform compatible. It would work on Windows, will work on Mac and Linux. No difference at all. But let's remember you're talking network license. So network license, we're going to need still our network license manager, so-called LM tools. It's still supported for the all major platform, whether it is Windows Server or normal Windows. So it's compatible with all version of Windows Server in case you opt for a server-based OS. So really not much to add here. Really little has changed in this regard. Let's remind that old version of Windows are not compatible anymore. So Windows Server 2003 is not compatible. So it's from 2008 and on. As per the most common issues, so if you have some experience troubleshooting network licensing for other software, you may be familiar with these error messages. Some of them may be straightforward, others can be a little more cryptic, but usually it's either a problem on our client machine that is not able to connect to the server or properly, or probably the server is not running on the other end. So we're going to check a little bit each of these scenarios. So what can happen is that it's either on the server, on the client, or the license file itself. So it's usually good practice to let the client and the server connect to each other. So always verify on the server if there is a firewall that is permitting incoming connection. Perhaps the LM tools is like a old version, so we need to always make sure that we are on the latest version. One note about that is that only the latest version of LM tools, which is 11.16, is compatible with version 2020. And perhaps there is some misconfiguration on the server itself, it's not pointing to the right license file, or there is an option file in place. There are some edge cases where everything looks okay, but then perhaps there is an option file that is blocking the access to our specific user. That is a little bit more advanced configuration, but it happens that when there are several users connecting to a server, you want to manage their access, and that's the need of option file. So this is more or less what can happen on the server. On the server, also, we can have a faulty license file. So let's say we, for example, upgraded our server and we moved to a new version of Windows Server, so the hardware changed as well. So the details of our server, like hostname and MAC address, changed, and those need to be reflected on the license file. If we still have a lone license file, we need to generate a new one, and we need to update those information to let it run with the LM tools. It could happen also that, for example, a subscription was renewed, and some licenses, including the license file, are technically expired. So again, new license file. So we don't have expired licenses in there, or just could be that. If we have a bunch of network license subscription and some of them are missing from a license file. So these are all cases where you just try to generate a new license file. It's the easiest step to follow. If you cannot generate it from the account, it's best to contact us so we can do it for you. I can verify. On the other aspect, we can also check if something is happening on the client. So usually we move just by excluding some items. If all is good on the server, we just check on the clients. If only some of the clients are pulling licenses and some specific users are not able to take a license, probably the issue is on their client workstation because everything is working for the other users. So we're going to need to check if, for example, they're excluded from using a specific license, or if, for example, they are pointing to an incorrect server. So that's also good to check. As I was saying, always ensure that the firewall is open for a server. Usually the ports are those I mentioned here, TCP 2080, and then the range between 27,000 and 27,009. There is a handy workaround to check that also on the Internet Explorer. And it's just easy to just ping the server to see if we can just connect. If you're not able to ping that probably it's blocked by the firewall. So this is the tool we can use. Maybe we are able to reach the server, but maybe we are not able to do so through the specific port we need. So we just try to open Internet Explorer, put our server name in there, colon, and then specify the port, which is 2080, and you should usually get a confirmation with this code here below. Doesn't really say much, but if you get that code, it's working. If it's not working, you probably get the page not reachable. That's about it. Another thing to check on our server, for example, is to verify which port we are using to connect to the server. So usually when you run the LM tools on the server and then you go check the bug log, you would see that the service is listening to a specific port. By default, if we haven't touched the license file, that port is 27,000. So just make sure that that port is open on your firewall. There are instances where that port could be used by another servers, unlikely, but it could happen. So in that case, we can manually go into the license file. You see down below, we open it with just a notepad and just change the port in there. Just right next to the MAC address, we can add, for example, a different port, 27,001. What this does is basically forcing the license manager to listen to that port when using this license file, of course. One thing to note, when you open the license file, I cannot stress this enough, just do it always with a notepad, or make sure that you're always saving it as a simple text file. If you open it with Word or WordPad, whatever, that could mess up the license file, the code inside. So just make sure to keep it simple. So how do we check which version of LM tools we are running? Sometimes we may have different version of LM tools. I've seen this many times. Perhaps there is an old version, 11.12, 11.13, still on the system, and then we install 11.16. But when we run the LM tools, the clients are not able to pull, for example, version 2020 of AutoCAD. So if you go check in on the server, you may see in the debug log that the version is not actually the latest one, so it's not 11.16. So just always make sure that you uninstall previous version of LM tools just to clean the system up, and then you install the new version. So when you start the server and you open the debug log, you may be able to see this line specifying the version that you are running on your server. There are instances, as I was mentioning, where you may need to change the server name on your clients. So the server name of your LM tools. Sometimes maybe only the host name changed, and it's easy to just rectify that on the license file. just again open it with text editor and change the host name directly into the file, and that's really easy. However, the same cannot be done for the MAC address. If you change your network card or just completely the hardware of your server, you need to generate a new license file. And then again, from the account, you can generate a new. Also left a small video down here where we provide instructions step by step for people who are new to the system. So what changed? And we are going to see this also in a second in a live demo. What changed between the previous versions and 2020 in regard to network licensing? So as you remember, with version 2017, 18, 19, we used to have the file licpat.lic. And this, it was stored under Autodesk program data, Autodesk CLM, LGS, and then under the specific folder for the program. With 2020, things have changed. So as you remember, I mentioned that now we don't have a CLM version anymore for 2020. We have ADSK licensing service folder. And you may notice that we moved the folder with the product key into here, into this folder. So just make sure that the leak path you're looking for is the right folder. Notice always that you may be familiar with the terminology leakpath.leak and the variable ADSK flex license file. With previous version, you may be able to just set up the variable ADSK flex license file and just disregard the leakpath.lic. That was an easy way to link to the server. So all software in your computer would point to that server if you had this system variable set up. When using redundant servers, though, it's always best to have leakpath files because we need to specify 3 different servers, redundant servers, so that's easily done with leakpath.lic. The same can be said for version 2020, and we're going to see in a second. So when you're using redundant server, make sure you're not using the environment variable. We want to specify the 3 servers, and to do so, we need to do it on the leakpath.lic. And always another note, if you're using the variable ADSK flex license file, make sure that there is no conflicting information between the value that we have in the registry and the one that we set up from the control panel. I've seen many times that these 2 values are not matching because the registry usually stores also old values. So perhaps you set it up correctly in the control panel, but if you go check in the registry, you may see several values. Maybe old servers are still in there, and that could slow down the software from starting because it's really checking each of those values, trying to connect to those servers. So I've seen that there is a question in our question box. Just gonna quickly reply to that. One of our users is asking if this webinar will be available as a video. Yes, it will, and it will be posted in the link included in this slide deck. And also in a follow-up email, you will be receiving the link to our playlists. Just give us some time to just upload it to YouTube, and then it will be available, but you will be notified for that. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so let's move on. So what happened with 2020? So if you remember, it was enough with version 2017, 2018, and 2019 to go change the file leakpath.lic or the variable ADSK flex. So you would just make sure that those values were correct and it will work. With 2020, if you are a little bit familiar with it, with the install helper, you can easily verify this information with the tool itself. So what this tool does is to read the information that we provided during activation. This information is stored in a small file in program data, and it's always valid no matter what we put in the leakpath.lic or the ADSK flex variable. So it's not enough anymore to just go check the variable or the leakpath file, but we need to make sure that the install helper is showing us the right server in there. If we are to change our server name, for example, you see here there's a server specified, and we change server, we need to update our client workstation. We need to go in there with the install helper from command line and reset this flag. And there is a specific syntax to do that. Once we do that, and then we launch the software again, we'll be asked for the new value that will be entered in here. So it's a little bit different from previous version, and it's always good to remember to check this value in case you are getting an error when trying to pull a license. All right, so let's go have a look at a small live demo that I've prepared. So we have our, sorry about that, let's end the slideshow for now. All right. Okay, so we have our client workstation in here. And I have prepared both AutoCAD 2017 and AutoCAD 2020. So first thing I wanted to show you is how this is different from before. So if you remember for 2017, you would go to Program Data, Autodesk, CLM, then LGS. You would look for the specific folder for that program. So for AutoCAD it would be 001 IU1, and you will look for the leak path filing in here. So that's the leak path for our 2017 software. For our 2020, we need to go to ADSK, license and service, 001 L1, it's the product key, and we'll find the leakpath.lic in here. Let me also show you for 2020. Okay, I already prepared this here. Let me just close it so I can show you from start. Okay, so we need to check with our install helper the license server information we have on this machine. So you remember I showed you where the install helper is stored. It's program files 86, common files, Autodesk shared ADSK licensing. Inside ADSK licensing, always go to current and then helper, and this is where our helper is stored. Now there is no user interface for this helper, so we need to call it from command prompt. We take the path, we throw it in the command prompt, and then we call it from our command line. So it's, let's see, so ADSK. All right, so in order to see the information that we have for AutoCAD, we give the flag list, and we can easily see what we have for AutoCAD in here. You see we have the feature ID, the product key. This is definitely our AutoCAD, 001 L1. If we scroll down, you would see the flag LIC server, exactly the one that I showed you before. So right now, what this means is that when we stored AutoCAD last time, we selected multi-user and we put in our license server IP address. But let's say we need to change this. So for example, our server changed and we have a new IP address. What we do is to first reset this flag. So again, ADSK licensing install helper. We give the flag change. So this is how you would reset the license usually. And then -pk, we put the product key in, PV with the version 2020 0.0.f. So to reset the license file is -lm and then 2 quotation marks. So to give it an empty value, -ls, again, 2 quotation marks, and also -lt, which is the license server type, again, quotation marks, and then enter. All right. So this is basically done. We just run list again to see if our changes were effective. All right. Okay, so as you can see, now we don't have the license server like before. So this flag, both the license server type and the license server value have been removed. And we have a clean AutoCAD 2020. An additional thing to do though is to go to our, let's minimize this, go to our ADSK licensing server and the program data, delete this file. So we want to have a clean slate and go to a registry, go to FlexLand License Manager, just make sure that we have no value. You see, we still have a value of our variable, which is pointing to our old 2017, and remove also this one. All right. So we don't have anything related to that server anymore. That means that if we run the software now, we should be able to select a new server. Let's just double check again here. Nothing here. All right, let's give it a new try. Okay, or let's get started window, multi-user, there you go. Okay, so let's just make sure that you don't have any variable in here in the registry, nor you have any lickpad file either for 2020 or 2017. So if you're changing your server, most likely you don't want any program pulling to the old server. So let's just clean it up completely. And yeah, here we just need to get our new server. Let me go pick up my old server, which is here. And put our IP address. And it should work. There you go. That's our license server. So if we run again our install helper with list command, we have our server back here. So this is really important to remember that when we need to reset our license information, whether you have 2017 or 2020 or a combination of both, let's just clean the registry from any new information. If we reset, we refresh the registry, you will see that also the system variable is created. This is done automatically by the software. And interestingly, this variable is pointing to our lickpad.lic file. So just remember to check with the installer helper and those two files and remove them if necessary. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. All right, so a few additional notes. We already covered this partially, but always remember that for each release year, a new license file is necessary. So make sure to generate a new license file from your account. If you cannot make it from your account, you have an issue with that, just reach out to us. We'll take care of it. So if sometimes, for example, you encounter an issue where some customers are not able to pull a license from the server, make sure that, for example, some of them didn't borrow a license. Most often than not happens that users take their laptops home. So in order to have a license for a software back at home, they would borrow a license from the license servers, which is usually very handy feature. The problem is that it could happen that the user borrow a license for several months, even when it's not necessary to borrow it for that long. So that license remain busy for them all the time, even when they are under their local network. So there are ways of dealing with this, which is usually to restrict the borrow period for users. Uh, so there are some commands that we can use with the option file to avoid that kind of scenario. So it's usually useful to remember that. There are also cases where there are licenses that are being used by the program, but the user is not actually working on the program. So you may want to look into set up a timeout command in the option file as well to avoid situation when they keep the licenses busy for other users while they're not actually working on them. So that's also good to remember. And one of very recent news is that with InfraWorks 2020, now we introduced support for network licenses. So if you remember, InfraWorks up until that version, up until 2020, didn't have a network license. So if you were to purchase an AC collection, you would have InfraWorks in there, but InfraWorks wouldn't use the network license. So it would be necessary to connect to the internet with the account of the specific user to use the software. Now, starting with update 2020.1, all AC collection are have InfraWorks license included in their license file. So users who may have already an AC collection, they only need to go generate a new license file. That license file will have InfraWorks in there, and they only need to update to 2020.1 for InfraWorks to make it work. So that could be very helpful for customers who are already working in a network licensing environment. All right, so we are reaching the end of our presentation. Always a shout out to our channel where you can find not only the registration of our webinars, but also new support content that we keep up to date as much as possible for end users or reseller or distributors who want to have a more interactive way to provide content to their customers. As said, there is a link here. There will be a link in the presentation. I will send you in a follow-up email later. So just check it out and subscribe if you want. All right, then we reached our question area, let's say. So should I have any question, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, I see there are some users writing in our question box. Said, yeah, the webinar will be published on our YouTube, and then you can go check it out from there. We don't share the actual video file. We only post it on our YouTube channel. If that's what you're asking, I hope that answers your question. Okay, while we wait for further question, just an update for the next webinar. So we'll try to have one webinar each month. We only plan it just 1 month ahead. So just for you to be updated, there is a link in the slide deck that points to our forum where we maintain a page with all the appointments, all the new upcoming webinar events. So make sure to bookmark that, and you will see the future webinar popping up in there as we roll them out. Okay, one of the users is asking, will we get a presentation also in PDF because of links to Windows Path? Well, usually we share the presentation in PowerPoint format, and from there you can also take the path, but it's not a problem. We can also share it in PDF, not an issue. I'll make sure to post it as PDF as well. Any other questions? All right, seems there are no other questions. I know there's a lot to take in, so it's totally normal not to have a question right now. But just because of that, I know that when you are in the heat of the moment, you need to solve an issue. That's when you need an answer, right? I've been there. So just to let you know that we're always available for you through our contact support page on our Autodesk website. And if you have any tough case that you cannot resolve yourself or your user are stuck with their work, we understand that licensing is a very sensitive subject, and when it's not working, the software is not working, the user is not working, stuff does not get done. So just because of that, we are always available to support you with a remote session or to look at the issue closer. So I would say that we can wrap this webinar up. Any other question, just feel free to send us a support case. And again, the presentation will be shared with you with a link in a follow-up email in around an hour, usually an hour after our webinar ends. And I hope I can see you in our next webinar. We'll decide the subject of that in the upcoming weeks. So thank you for joining. It was always a pleasure to have you with us, and I'll wish you a very nice day. Bye.